Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again for another video. This is Scott from Heroic Studios Gaming. Hey, today I'm going to do another RPG corner where I talk about stuff, especially games that I like, and this one in particular is actually kind of a little bit interesting for me to cover because it is a small indie game that you may or may not have heard of, and if you have, great. I actually read it back in the day, and for whatever reason, I guess I didn't get quite as much out of the game's rules as I originally thought, and so I decided to give it a read again. Kind of impressed with the work. Very indie developer by Stephen Dewey. The game that I'm talking about today is 10 Candles that I printed out because I only have the PDF version. Sorry, I'll give you a better... 10 Candles, a role-playing game of tragic horror is the name of this game. It's written by Stephen Dewey at Cavalry Games. It's just him, very small indie guy who has made this game and has worked with a couple of other things. In fact, his list includes things like the LARP Uncanny Valley, another LARP called Two Mediums, and then some unreleased games called Annalers of the Skeen and To Serve Her Hungry Witch. These are indie games, and this itself is an indie game. It is an interesting game, in my opinion, because it's not like a typical RPG. It is a game that is designed in much the same fashion as a lot of indie games, where it has like a specific sort of outcome. It's like a one-shot storytelling system, and I don't mean like one-shots, like a series of one-shots that make a campaign. I mean like legitimately, the end of this game is designed to be over, and your characters are done. But fortunately, the character creation is very lightly made, so you're doing a certain thing to tell a certain kind of story, and the certain kind of story you're trying to tell is a tragic horror story, not a survival horror story, not a apocalyptic horror story, but like a tragic horror story, because in the end, everybody dies. There's going to be one final like fight scene where everybody tries to take on whatever the big bad scary thing is for the whole game, and then at the end, inevitably, eventually, everyone dies. And the game rules sort of reflect that continuous like decline toward this darkness. Because the world of this game is that at some point they came, whomever they are. And each game session you play, it will be different days. And not because the game master can tweak around and be like, oh, they're robots or aliens or whatever, but because the players themselves actually kind of choose, as the story goes, who they are. It's part of the system where everyone's telling a collaborative story together. But essentially the way that it works is in this world, they came and they brought the darkness with them. Whatever happened when they came, it sort of stopped things like power generators and stuff like that. And so slowly or quickly, depending on how you set up the story, everyone became like entered in this post-apocalyptic world where slowly but surely lights kind of went out. But the main thing is that the world got blanketed somehow and the sun didn't rise again. So everything is dark. There's no moon, no stars, no sun, and everyone's relying on powered grids and things, which eventually all start to fail and collapse until eventually you have just the players trying to survive their last moments alive as they close in. That's the story. So that's the premise of every one of the modules that come along with the game, and there's a bunch of them. There's a whole number of them that come in. In fact, I didn't actually count, but I think there's quite a few. Just looking at it, there's like several pages of quick story modules, because the idea is that it's not a story that needs like stats and stuff. In fact, you don't even really use stats in this game, so it's not like they need to stat out a bunch of things or challenges. It's just like, here's the premise, now roll with that as the collaborative storytelling you're going with for your players. But every player will create their character together with the rest of the group. And you're going to play this game trying to use those things as additional dice or sort of moments. But it's built on the idea that there are 10 candles, so there will be 10 scenes in the game session. Now, that isn't necessarily the case. Like, you will have 10 candles, and each scene blows out a candle, and so slowly there's eventually going to be no candles, and that's when the game is over. But there's a rule that says that if a candle goes out for any reason, whether that's a breeze comes in the room or somebody accidentally blows out 2 candles at the same time, you don't relight the candle, so it is out. So it may not be 10 scenes. It could be 3 scenes if someone's really like bad about blowing out candles. But it's going to be at a maximum 10 scenes. But that's the setup. So there's 10 scenes, and you put these 10 tea light candles in a circle around, hopefully, something to hold burning paper, because you're going to burn paper as the story goes. This is very much a must-be-done in-person kind of game. No playing it online that I can tell. I tried to sort of think about how to play it online, and I think it's going to be pretty difficult, even with Roll20 and stuff. I'm sure there's probably ways, but I'm going to guess that it's probably incredibly difficult to play it online, because you have certain things that revolve around actually getting rid of your stuff, and so you'd have to just pretend to burn stuff as you go. But the other thing is that when you make your characters, you don't make your own character. You make a character collaboratively, and that involves writing like traits on cards and handing them to your right and left, the players to your right and left, and like secrets and things and handing them to the players to your right and left, right? So so the characters to your right and left are going to have the things that you came up with, and you're going to have the things that the players to the right and left of you came up with for your character. And that's how you develop a character. So you'll have a stack of index cards with these sort of 5 elements to them. That are your 2 traits, your positive and negative trait, like your virtue and vice, essentially. And then you're also going to have your moment, which is the moment when your character like shines, the moment when your character like has the spotlight, some moment that really affects your character. And if you succeed on the roll during your moment, then you get to have your hope die for the rest of the game, where you have this extra die off to the side that you can roll, that you roll basically whenever. And then you'll have your brink, which is like your dark secret, the thing that you hide, and that's sort of what your character is. And then you've got a card that's just got like your stuff, just some of your stuff on it. So like how old you are and what you look like and that kind of thing. And that's how the game goes. And so you're just going to kind of like work your way through the game. Everyone has a communal dice of 10 dice. To start off with, and then for each candle that you blow out, that's how many that's how many the communal dice is for each scene. So when you're in scene 2, there'll be 9 dice. Scene 3, there'll be 8 dice. You see where I'm going with this. Until the final scene, when you'll have 1 die, and unless you have your hope die, right, the special hope die that you get to have. Yeah, so that's sort of like how the game works in as a whole. You roll the dice when you want to succeed at something, like kick open a door or find something or whatever, and if you get any 6s whatsoever on the die, cool, you succeeded on whatever it was. But if you get no 6s on the d6s, I'm sorry, there's d6s on the d6 dice, then you failed at your roll, and if you failed, then you end the scene because you failed at whatever it was you were trying to do, and that ends the scene. That means you blow out a candle, and then everyone adds to the story, which I'll get into in a second. But then if you have 1s on the dice, those dice are removed from the communal pool for the rest of the scene. So even if you succeed on the scene or on your action, you may decrease the pool, and that will make it harder for everyone to continue in that scene doing stuff, because the communal pool will go down until eventually somebody will fail doing an action in the scene, and then that will require that the players blow out the candle and you move on to the next scene. At the end of every scene, when the candle blows out, then it moves to the next scene, and the transition's supposed to be simple. Like, it's not supposed to be like something like, oh, we have to figure out an elaborate way of how we got across the frozen lake. No, you get across the frozen lake because this is like a movie where there'll be this transition scene. Then you got across the frozen lake, you ended up at the cabin on the other side, but stuff happened, right, to get there. So that's where at the end of the scene, before you start the next scene, you have this moment where everyone establishes truths. And what that means is the players will go around the table and they will all say something that is true, that happened. And you'll establish a number of truths equal to the number of candles that are currently still lit. So each scene will have less and less truths. But the truths can be something like they came out of nowhere, or they can be positive things like we found something, or we got to the cabin safely, or no one got lost along the way, or something positive. Or they can be something negative like we got to the cabin, but like the truth is that we lost someone on the lake, right? And that, or I lost my gun or my picture of my family or something. And the truth can be positive or negative, and you just establish it as truth. And so now that's part of the story. So that happened. And then you can deal with that in the next scene or not deal with that in the next scene, depending on how it goes. But that allows the players to say something like, they saw a glimpse of the monsters and they know what they are. or they got to the cabin safely and not have to worry about like something not having gone right, like trying to get back, right? Even if they failed the previous scene. Well, we're fighting a thing. I failed to, attack it, so we end the scene, and the truth is that, we got away. Because in this game there are no player deaths until the final scene. So unless the players opt to sacrifice themselves in some way to save the others in a previous scene, at a crisis moment, essentially at a critical juncture, then they didn't die, and so they will continue on until the very end when everybody dies. So it's an interesting game system for like a night. It feels to me, because it has to be played in person for the most part. Everyone's going to die in the end, so everyone knows that going in that they're going to die in the end. Your characters are not like a set of stats or things that you created on your own. The dice are communal, and the lights are communal. And so it sort of feels like this is like a party game, right? This is more of a game that you play with a group of friends on a night when you just want to do something different. That you're like having dinner at a friend's house or something. It's like a party game, a bachelor party game, maybe, if you're into that sort of thing, for your bachelor party. I mean, I am. That totes would have been fun on my bachelor party. But it's like a party game, and seems like a cool sort of one-shot step away from the typical horror games or post-apocalyptic games. So, I mean, I thought it was interesting to read. I haven't actually played it. I watched a YouTube video where they played it, and it seemed like it could go pretty fun. Everybody knows they're going to die in the end, so everyone's just trying to do goofy, fun stuff along the way to, like, have a fun time, because they also know that they can't die unless they choose to die. So that's an interesting thing, because you know that you're not worried about your character dying, but it also doesn't matter. You're trying to tell a cool story, so people being able to do things that are like a horror movie feel, where like slowly they're getting like worse. Things are getting worse and worse and worse, because inevitably it will reach the final climactic moment, and they will not live through it, right? So, yeah, it's like that essentially. So I would give it at least a thumb up for its creativeness. The only reason I'm reluctant to give it 2 thumbs, even though I think it's pretty well done. The writing was okay. The design was very simple, as you would expect from an indie game. But the only reason why I'm reluctant to give it a second thumb was only because it doesn't have, aside from replaying the exact same sort of thing over again where you're going to die, there's not like a continued campaign sort of feel to it. So it does feel like it's a very niche kind of situation. So in its niche, I give it 2 thumbs. Outside of its niche, I don't really know what you would do with it, so I can only give it 1 thumb. Right, and that's it. So in its niche, 2 thumbs. So there's that. But outside of that aspect, I'd only give it overall in the world of RPGs 1 thumb. But I did read this. It came out in 2014, or 2013? Let me double check. I thought it was 2014. 2014, yeah, because it was a copyright in 2015. But in 2015-ish is when I read it. And so that's when I saw it originally, and I think it was a slightly different version, because I don't remember quite as much to this book, but I did go through the file. And the interesting thing is, when I was looking for the file on my computer to find it, it was the same file as I have here that I recently repurchased this from them, because, supporting indie people is like a thing to do. So I repurchased this PDF version, but when I found the old file, it was the exact same. So I guess I did have those things, and I kind of skipped over it. I'm not sure. Or maybe I didn't really know how to look at indie stuff quite as well as I do now. I don't know. But anyway, it seems like a fun game, and I would love to play it sometime if I have the right people. But yeah, that's it. So that'll be my quick little video for this month, and I hope to see you guys at future videos where you want to see or hear my versions of what I think about games. So I'll see you later.